there. So, if we have viewers, today's Technical Tuesday, and on Technical Tuesday, we generally tackle anything that is media related, and since I had no request for any specific material or medium, hi Alona, since we had no specifics for today's request, what I thought is I would go back to my old way of doing Open Studio, where I just paint and talk my way through it. So I'm actually starting with a painting that has been more than started, and this is the way kind of I leave you guys on Fridays after we do a lot of our painting and they're left wet, right? Then I say then you can finish them up. So I'm going to, this one was left super wet and soggy and everything else, so I'm just going to start working on this one. And if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to fire away and we'll get them answered for you. I'm just going to adjust this so that the light isn't as crazy. There we go. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is, hi Crystal. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work away today on when we walk, or when I, anyway, like I said, when I get you guys to a point on Fridays where we leave our painting soggy wet. It's very crackly. Okay, let me know if this clears things up at all. I'm also going to try and remove the case again. So a lot of times yeah, so if I leave a painting, I generally leave them pretty wet. So you've heard me talk about it before. I always say, leave your painting wet, let them dry, and then you can deal with them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by some of the things that I often do. And so one of them is I'll take a scraper of some kind and I'll get rid of some of the little bits that may not stick. So I could use sandpaper or a scraper. But often when I scratch into wet, I get a lot of little and on white, right? So when I go in with my scraper, I'm able to remove some of those things that haven't quite attached themselves to the painting. And sometimes it's big pieces of collage. Other, you can't hear me? There's no sound. How is now? I just took the microphone out. Let me know if you can hear me now. If you can't hear me now, then I'm going to restart the video again. Sound better? Good. So maybe it's my microphone. Maybe it's seen better days. Maybe it's the time I dropped it in my big vat of goo. Anyway, perfect. Okay, so I'll keep going. Anyway, maybe I'll just re-explain what I'm doing. So often when I leave you guys on Fridays after your workshops and stuff, we have things that have been left wet, right? So I always say, okay, now your painting needs to dry, and then you can do the finishing touches. So now that this painting has had a chance to dry, I'm coming back in and I'm going to start doing the finishing touches and start to really look at the composition and let some things go, bring some things out, do a little finishing touches. But the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking a scraper and I'm just removing any little bits that didn't stick. So the reason they wouldn't have stuck is because when I scratch through the wet paint, you get little bits of paper and things like that that will peel back and curl. And now I'm just going in and removing removing anything that didn't want to be there. Sometimes it's little bits of collage, and it's good. I like that. So when I come back in and I see that it's wet, I see that the white is fairly, for me, the white could be cleaned up. Some of the areas that look a little too grungy, that's a good area for me to go in and refine a little bit. When I have a painting like this, I like to go in and with my big vat of goo and just, oh, it could use a bit of water. I'll maybe just tone it a little bit. So it seems like it has a little bit of, I'm going to add a bit of color to that. Okay, so my big vat of goo, as you guys know, is just where I usually clean my brush. And some of the parts look like it could be, oh, it's starting to stink. Some of the parts look like it could be stained a little bit. So first thing I'm going to do is come in, add a bit of stain, let it drip. Any parts of the paper that were left raw, we'll take the stain, and then I'll come in with baby wipes and we'll remove everything else. This is a good area down here. So I know I have milk paint in here and it is starting to smell like milk, so I'm probably going to have to get rid of this big vat of goo and start over. Whew, it is pretty ripe. It's funny because yesterday I came in my studio and I thought it was the garbage, so I threw the garbage out. Turns out it wasn't the garbage at all, it was this. All right. So that's looking all right. Okay, so now I'm going to grab some baby wipes, some paper towel, remove some of this stuff. So this removes what's on the surface, and then the baby wipes will remove any additional like staining and dirtiness that maybe I don't want. Because I don't want the whole thing to look like it, you know, was left outside over the winter. I do want some of it to be cleaned up a little bit, but staining is usually one of those layers that only works when the painting is dry. And let me see if I can bring you guys in for a closer look here. Here we go. I'll just bring you over. So you can see the staining, where's my finger there? So you can see the staining in the areas works so much better once the painting's dry, because otherwise it's going to turn to mud. So now that I've got that, I'm going to come in with my baby wipes, take off the top layer, and then I'll be ready to go in with some more paint and start cleaning it up and refining it a little bit. So this is just some of the surface brown that I don't want. It's like a little antiquing layer, which just gives my black and white image a bit of nostalgia, right? When you take a black and white image, if you're savvy enough with your filters and things before you print it, you can adjust some of the colors and things like that. But if you're like me and you're only printing in black and white, especially at Staples on the big ones, it's a fraction of the price to have your pieces printed. It's a fraction of the price to have your pieces printed in black and white than it is in color. So then I just actually come in and do the coloring afterwards. So right now I'm just, oh, that looks gorgeous there. So right now I'm just removing some of the stain that I put in to bring in a little bit of crispness, but I like the fact that I've got some areas that look very nostalgic and a bit more sepia tone. And then I love the fact that some areas are a bit crisper and brighter in colors. So the relationship now between the black and white image, because it has a little color on it and things like that, it's starting to soften, and the two are integrating more naturally. You probably notice in your paintings, if you integrate a black and white image, then sometimes it ends up looking like, because of the value contrast, it ends up looking like the only thing that your eye is focused on. So we have two ways. Remember, we talked yesterday about the penguins, if anybody saw that. We have two ways of bringing your eye through the painting. So when you're looking up here, obviously the contrast of the black and white elk will be where your eye starts because of the value contrast, but there's enough other darker and mid-tone areas that are bringing things together. But the second way that I've made these two more comparable is by adjusting the colors in the elk itself. So it's not just black and white. He's black and white and tan, and there's some blue in here and some lighter colors and some gray. And so he's got a lot more mid-tone things happening, which is balancing out much nicer with the bottom so that our eye doesn't just get stuck here. So I've been toying with the idea of turning part of this painting black, and I did the same thing. Remember, if anyone saw the Waxing Wednesday, where I did the painting with the gnomes, and right at the end I said, oh, I think I want a black sky. I've been toying with the idea of doing like a lot more black on this painting, and it's not that often that I have these sort of like struggling issues, but the issue I'm struggling with is normally I tend, if I'm going to do a lot of black, I would do it at the top. But at the top on this one is where I already have my black and white image. So if I do black up there, it's going to be hard pressed for your eye to want to come to the bottom of the painting. So that's my first sort of like hesitation with turning this painting a lot of black. Then the second part is I could turn the black part, the bottom part black, and then have a nice relationship between the two. And that's where I'm leaning, and my sensibilities are telling me that that would be the better choice. Neither one is permanent. It is only paint, right? So I can always undo. So let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. For now, I'm just trying to remove a bit of that brown. Because like I said, a little bit of antiquing is nice. A lot tends to look pretty grungy, pretty dirty. There we go. Warm it up a little bit. The brown warmed it up a little bit. And now the white's cleaning it up a little. There. Okay. That's good. So where my paper was torn, you can now see their darker patches. There we go. Let me I just saw somebody message me. I'll get back to you afterwards. All right. Okay, so far so good. I think I need to put that black in. I don't know why, but it's just something I wanted to try. If it doesn't work, we take it out, right? So it's as simple as that. And here I am trying to demonstrate complete flexibility with our paintings and our art, right? So I'm not going to show any fear right now and hesitation and should I, shouldn't I? I'm just going to do, and because I know that something better will come out of it, and I can always undo. I just know that the white on the bottom and white on the top is not working for me. So let's just try and see what happens. I hope this is really illustrating the point to you guys that just because I've been painting a long time and a lot of people have a perception that I seem to know things about painting, what you have to know that I know is just that I trust my instincts. So if my instincts are telling me you need to have a lot of black somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure, I'm not going to not do it because I'm unsure. It's because I just don't fully see yet or trust the process of where this is going. So I'm just going to start painting and see if it starts to speak to me at all. So we'll see what happens. I often get that question. Somebody will say to me, should I do this? Or, you know, what would it look like if I did this? And my answer is always the same. Just try it. How will you know until you try? So when I'm kind of combining Trusting Thursday with this Technique Tuesday, because this is really a great example of how I paint. I just get in here and I just trust that I'm not going to put too much paint. I'm not going to put too little paint. That when I put a brush stroke down, it'll either excite me, it'll repulse me, it'll intrigue me. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not afraid of covering anything up. There's nothing really precious at this point, and I really don't know how, like I said, how it's going to look until I actually do it. So I'm just going to try. And the other thing I also know is that, and I think I did this if anybody was watching the painting on Thursday. The painting on Thursday, I was demonstrating the technique that I use often, where I will paint black on top of something, and then I'll tame it with a lighter color. So I can't remember what color I used when I did the painting with the big eyes on the bottom and the queen with the crown. But I do know I was demonstrating to you guys that I paint like a darker color underneath, and then it gives a nice little influence to a lighter color on top. And then when you scratch through, you get nice black scratch marks instead of light faint ones. So let's just see what happens. Because I have to say, so far I'm liking the rounding of the black, but it is feeling really heavy. I'm also loving the contrast. So we'll just see what happens. And it might be that there's too many shapes. Maybe I need to eliminate some of the shapes. You really do, when you're working as large as I'm working, you really do need to stand back often, analyze, question, try something, take it out, try something new. That's interesting. So look at this. So as I'm painting this, I'm having a little bit of spidey sense of tingling here towards adding, I'm going to grab a pencil, to continuing this shape in the dark. So the black, the black paint is coming here, and I'm feeling like it could easily go up that way. So I'll give it a try and see what happens. But I feel like this could bring the two parts together way more seamlessly than I was trying to do. I also feel like this window can go. It's doing nothing for me. Isn't it funny? I put the window there and I felt like at that time it was like really clever, and now I'm like, who needs that window? Okay. All right, now I feel like maybe I want to put one up the other side as well. Okay. So I'm doing it with a pen marker first. because the brush that I have in my hand is way too fat. But that gives an interesting shape that I hadn't planned on. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Sophie is excellent at taking the before and the after. So Sophie, if you're watching this one today, I would love to see how it looked before. I don't even think I've taken a picture, but I feel like that was super exciting, that shape that just got created. So I'm gonna play that up a little bit and see what happens. That gray can go. It's not feeling like it's any love lost there. Okay. I think I'm definitely going to bring some white back into it because I don't think I want the whole bottom dark anymore. Initially I thought that I did, but now that I've got these other shapes continuing, I think I'm liking that a lot. So I'm going to end it here. And again, using my lines, because remember, you guys can't see them, but I'm always scratching in lines and scribbling in lines. I'm just following some of my other lines. So there's a line here. Try and emphasize that a little bit. It was right there. Okay, nice. Nice, nice, nice. And this part can get filled in. So the black is still a bit harsh, but it's definitely giving me this roadmap that I'm always talking about. Needing and liking and craving in my art is having a sense of direction, right? So when you're uncertain of where you're going, it helps to have a map, right? It helps to have a bit of navigation. So my lines that I have randomly drawn in, carved in, scraped in, and repeatedly and continuously adding random lines, they become my navigation. And it doesn't mean that just because I didn't put them in before that they can't exist. You guys have seen me add paper, pattern paper, where I jump off of something I've put on because it's created an interesting line. So now I have like 2 interesting lines, 3 interesting lines, which are subtle, but they're there. And now I have this shape inside here. I'm liking where this is going. I'm liking it much more than when I started. At the beginning, I felt like I had a lot of background going on, and it felt like it needed to be I hesitate to use the word tamed, but it felt like it needed to be tamed a little bit, pulled together. My brush is way too fat. I'm not sure why I don't just find a thinner brush. Cool. Okay, so now I'm just going to start staining a little bit. I have a little bit of this yellow left over. Add a little bit of that here and there. My orange feels a bit wishy-washy. I'll just wake it up a little bit. There we go. Spray a little water. Get it to do a little drippy. Yellow is always really good as an underpainting color because once you add something on top of it, the yellow really shines through and gives it a lot of vibrancy. So don't hesitate to use your crazy yellows, your lemon yellows, and your cadmium yellows and all those things as an under painting color to other colors. So it's definitely a technique that a lot of oil painters use, they'll paint their canvas first like one color, like a yellow or something like that, whereas opposed to we're used to a pre-photo can be taken during the replay. Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, one of the things that we're definitely used to is starting with a white gessoed canvas, right? So the notion of starting with white seems, I think, very acceptable to us because it's something that we commonly see. You buy a canvas, it's primed in white, ready to go. An oil painter will take that and they'll give it life. They'll breathe life into their forest or their flowers or whatever by doing an underpainting, and generally it starts with a wash of colors, and often there'll be a lot of yellow in there because it does really bring out whatever you're putting on top. So my colors that I have on this surface are pretty dull, and you can see that the yellow is just really waking it up. So it doesn't mean that I can't go through and change that yellow. I don't have to have that crazy yellow, but you can see how like the orange is just wishy-washy down here, and that's just as a result of the way it dried. This painting has a lot more color and craziness going on than I would have anticipated, but it's all right. There's always taming, right? There's always taming. Lots of water. Cool. Okay, a bit more baby wiping, I think. Got a lot of color up here, so I'm going to just remove some of it. And then I feel like I want to start maybe bringing in some of my other colors. I like this blue, so I don't think I'm going to change that. But I think I might bring in a different blue up at the top. Let's see what I got going. Oh, I know. So, and if I don't have the right color, like, because now I've got all these warmer shades going on because of the staining, I can wait and then add the, I can wait and I can add the Big Vat of Goo Brown afterwards. Or what I can do is I can dispense some of my color and then I can mix in a little bit of the brown right into it, and that'll automatically give me a tone that is going to be not as foreign as what I've got going on here. So, whoops, let me grab a brush, mix some brown into my blue. Might be a little much, so I'll add a little more blue. There we go. Okay. So where did I want to put that? I think I wanted to put that. And then I feel like I could calm the whole thing down with some white afterwards. But in the meantime, I'm going to use this brown. I still have to integrate and seat this elk a little bit because he still feels just a little floaty. Okay. Nice. So I feel like I could crisp it up later with a bit more white, but for now this blue is definitely looking like a nice refreshing addition to what I've got going on so far, and it's pulling the two hemispheres, if you will, together. I don't know if you guys see that, but it's pulling it together for me. And I'm just adding a little bit at the bottom at the same time so that they're not as foreign, these two blues. baby wipe that a little bit to soften it. It doesn't need to be as harsh as that. But for now, let's just leave it at that. And I'll bring in this blue to the top. Yeah, it's feeling much nicer to me than the white. I could still use some white and some cream in this painting, but the blue is acting, I guess, maybe as a bit of an underpainting, and it's bringing those two together. I haven't felt wow about this painting in a while, and now I'm totally getting like tingly about it. Your mixing of paint colors is wonderful. How can you teach that? Blue and brown? Actually, I will show you guys how to do. I do a mixed dirty palette all the time. So I don't really, in order to pull all the colors together, especially at the end, you can see my palette. My palette is never really like paint directly out of the tube, only at the beginning. Then when I get working, I start to mix my colors with, like, if I take that blue and now if I'm going to introduce, let's say, a green, I'll take a little bit of that blue, so I'll use my dirty brush, and then I'll mix in that green, and now I know that that green has a little bit of that blue in it. So it's only very early on where I'm working like directly out of the can or directly out of the tube. With the colors that are pre-made. Then afterwards, as I'm getting closer and closer to finishing, when I'm pulling things together, that's when I start to use my colors that, that's when, thank you, Suzanne. That's when I use my colors that are all on my palette, and I'm very rarely using a clean brush towards the end. I'm always putting a little of the previous color into the new color. And when I'm saying a little bit, like it's a little bit. It's not gobs and gobs and gobs of paint. It's just a little bit of paint, but that's all you need sometimes to pull it together. So I can absolutely talk more about that because it's like a mixed palette. And it used to be that I would go to the paint store and I would be so underwhelmed by the choices, even though there's like hundreds of choices. I always thought, why don't they actually just make things in sets, all the colors that go together? And then as I would be painting, I thought, well, if that doesn't exist like that, or it doesn't really, like sometimes when you look at people's work and their colors just like sing together, it's generally because they're making those colors work together. It's not because they've just bought the 6 right colors that magically work together. They've kind of created that as they've gone. So we can absolutely talk more about that because it really is a process. I've got my paint so wet here, it's dripping all over the floor and onto my shoes. It's really just a process, and maybe for me it was born out of kind of laziness because I didn't feel the need to pick up a new brush or clean my brushes in between. So I started adding a little bit of the previous color, and then I would just use the color until the color ran out. And then when the color ran out, then I would just pick up a new color without changing the color on my brush. And then I started to learn that the color mixing was actually happening like sort of for me rather than me having to control it as much as I thought I was doing or buying the right colors initially. So my first layer of blue is I don't know, how am I going to describe this? My first layer of blue is still a little bit dirty and it's still a little bit translucent. Get my tongue to cooperate today. So what I'm going to do is let it sit for a few seconds, and then I'm going to come back in with something lighter on top. But for the meantime, I'm going to thin that out a little bit down here using my baby wipes. So blending is super easy if you are using sort of semi-dry paint. So because I just created this, it's definitely dry to the touch, or a little bit dry to the touch. but it's definitely not cured yet. So now is an easy time for me to come in with my baby wipe from the outside, and then blending in, I can just start to remove and blend that color seamlessly, and almost it ends up looking like a dry brush, or it also ends up looking like a bit of a pastel. And the more I use baby wipes on this, the more I can get back to the under layers. And then I'm bringing in colors that are like this teal. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but there's a teal color in here that was underneath, that there's a splatter here, there's a splatter there, it's in this shape here. It was over here somewhere. I'm sure I can find it again. So there's a relationship in the layers, right? And the more we end up working a piece, and the more we end up thinking we're messing it up, we're actually doing ourselves a really interesting favor by layering and adding and removing, because we uncover stuff that was unintentionally put there in the first place. So all these colors that I thought were too much, and the white, remember I said I didn't like, there was too much white. Look at when I put that yellow over and the yellow ran down, it ate through, now that I'm removing it, it ate through the black, and now it created some white drips, which are fascinating, because I didn't drip any white paint there, right? So the white was there before, I put the black, let the yellow drip through, the yellow dripped through, ate through the black, revealed the white. So again, like, there's no way you could actually plan that. So it's really fun when stuff like that happens, and then you get to see some layers that you had unintentionally put down in the first place. As Urkel would say, I meant to do that, or whatever he said. It's the same kind of principle, right? Like, you look like a genius when stuff like this happens, but this to me is the good stuff. This is when I get excited, when I see these fun areas, these fun things happening that I didn't plan, but they're way cooler than my creative sensibilities could have ever designed for me at the beginning of all this. If I had said, oh, I'm going to do some white drips here and some, you know, they'll have a bit of a hint of yellow going through them, and all, I couldn't have done that. So by letting it happen and just be willing to play, willing to see what's going to happen. Oh, this is also interesting. So remember I told you I thought the black was a bit harsh, but it was kind of necessary to bring your eye up here. And now using a baby wipe and I'm softening it, it's creating a distressed black line that is completely in harmony with the rest of this painting. I can't wait for you guys to get into that flow, to get to that point, and I know some of you are experiencing it more and more the more you're practicing these techniques that I'm showing before you, and when you're participating in the Friday workshops and you're just learning to let loose and trust. And I really, it's this moment when things are happening right before your very eyes that you're absolutely thrilled with your results, as unplanned and as beautiful as they are. Okay. So I always say things have to look pretty bad before they look pretty good. So this is where I'm going to start to clean it up a little bit. There are some areas that are starting to look a little, even I have a certain level of tolerance for even too much grunge. And my sensibilities would tell me it's time to start cleaning it up. So the way I clean up a painting is I just take some areas and I put solid paint. The solid paint helps calm things down, and it helps the grungy areas look super grungy. It helps the texture really pop, but then it gives an area of quiet and an area of rest. So I get that question a lot from you guys. It's how do you know when enough is enough or when too much is too much? That's just a matter of playing that balance, right? That back and forth between too much and too little. I need to find some white. Give me a sec. My cans are so dirty that I actually can't tell anymore what is a paint. Here we go. I can't tell anymore what's a paint and what's just a empty container. Dirty old empty container. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little bit of the white and try and clean some of this up. So this white that I'm using is not very, what's a good way of putting it? It's pretty translucent. So I wouldn't buy it again, but like I said, that's why Open Studio was born, right? Because it was out of a time when, and a time that a lot of us are still in, with reduced abilities to go out shopping and things like that. So I just decided during Open Studio that I was going to use everything I had. So aside from a little bit of wallpaper paste, I haven't bought any art supplies in months now, which is crazy to me, because before I was a bit of a hoarder for all these products, and now I'm just getting a chance to use them. So, which is actually a blessing in disguise too, because I'm actually using the things that I bought before, and I'm also finding new favorites and discovering new favorites that I didn't know I actually liked as much as I did. So I think I'm gonna have to paint these antlers back in, because no matter what I try to do to save them, I'm not loving it. So it's okay. I had glued a piece of fabric up here, like a bit of a translucent gauzy fabric that had gold stars on it, and I love where they are. I just love everything about them up there. So I think I'll paint around the stars and bring the antlers back in afterwards with a bit of paint, because it's a bit hard to try to save them. It's also like when I'm cutting out fine collage, like if it's something really tedious, it's not that often I'll actually take the time to use an X-Acto knife and cut around it. I usually just cut it off and then paint it back in later. So poor animals rarely have little tails and things like that because I'm too lazy to cut them out. I just paint them in afterwards. And if I'm not 100% sure where the antlers go and whatever afterwards, I can always reference the initial photo and put them back in. I don't want to strip this poor elk of his antlers, so they will go back in some capacity. Maybe they'll be more interesting, maybe they'll be doing something, maybe they'll have a hat on them, maybe they'll something. I say maybe because I'm open at this point. We'll see what happens. Definitely needs some white, some more white. There's a lot of blue. So this, I think I'm going to follow my lines that were there and then just baby wipe it out. Maybe there'll be a nice subtle we'll see. All we can do is follow the shapes, see where they lead us. As I've told you guys before, I trust my intuition way more than I trust myself when it comes to painting. Even when I would attend a workshop or something like that, I would always make sure that I was really like in the right mind frame to obviously watch the teacher, to learn, to absorb, But to really make it my own, I really had to make sure that I gave my intuition permission to show up and just do what it felt it needed to do. And then I just had to let go and trust. So I often hear that in a workshop. A lot of people say, oh, I'm just here to learn, and then I'm going to go home and then I'll do the techniques. And I think there's a lot of fear in that they're just afraid to let their intuition maybe make a mistake or guide them down the wrong path. But I have to tell you, it's the risk takers, the ones who do trust that intuitive side of themselves, and to trust that creativity, it's those people who generally end up learning the most, because they're actually right there, they're hands-on. They have the advantage of using collective knowledge, right? They've got the teacher in front of them, they've got the high energy of the students around them, you've got all the best materials required for the job right in front of you. So why wouldn't you just like go with your gut, and instead of saying I'll wait till I get home to make miracles happen, just let them fly? Why would you wait? Why wouldn't you want to go home and say, what a great day, what a great learning experience, rather than saying, oh, now I've got work to do. I've got to learn how to do that thing that I just learned how to do. So trust yourselves more. There's a weird pink color under here, I think from when we were doing the soft pastel thing, and I'm just letting it go. If it bleeds through again, like it's a fun color in contrast to what I'm doing right now, but I'm good with it. Like if it goes, it goes. And bleed throughs are always nice too, because they're like little gifts, right? A color you place down that you didn't think stood a chance once you covered it up, and then voila, lo and behold, it shows up again for you like magic. That's how I feel about scratching back to another color, or when the drips happen and reveal something else, right? It is like magic, because it's not something planned. It's something that through the layers of play and trusting that you develop this thing. One of my favorite things is when I go to a what do you want to call it? Like if I'm in a show or something like that, an exhibition, and someone who's savvy in mixed media will come up and they'll go, how did you do that? And it's usually something that there's just no way I could ever even describe the process. And so I think that's where the term happy accident is probably the best answer for a lot of people, because it's nothing more than a culmination of you trying this and you trying that, and something comes of it, right? So there we go. So I'm sure you guys all have paintings or backgrounds or something that I feel today's message of trust yourself a little more could really benefit. So I'm sure if you have one of those and you have the time today, or in Trusting Thursday or something, maybe it's time to grab that painting and tackle it, and to just trust that you know what it is you need to do to make that happen. So again, there was no plan for this one, right? This is just, let's see what happens. And I'm looking at areas, and some areas I'm liking, some areas can go. It's just all about trusting this process, trusting I have everything I need in my studio. Can't blame COVID. Can't blame my family. Can't blame anybody. Can't blame the teachers talking too fast. You can't blame anything. It's just about trusting. So I encourage you, find that painting that you have that all it requires right now is your trust that you know what to do. You pull that painting out, and then if you don't know what to do, open up your paint supplies, open up your paint drawer, and then just say, what do you want, right? What do you want, painting? I don't know what you're saying. What do you want? It'll tell you. Sometimes, like I said, this one was nagging me. It was saying, put black on it, put black on it. And I kept feeling like it's going to be really harsh if I put black on it. And it is harsh. Like there's no two ways about it. It is a harsh color. But this is all part of the layering. And I am trusting that that's all good. And I have to say, there isn't one time that I haven't created a painting that has been purely created out of like this process of just trusting and going with my gut and playing and having fun, that I haven't stepped back and go, wow, that painting was a lot of fun to make. I used to be in a place where I would struggle with my paintings, and then I would look back and I would say, wow, that one gave me a hard time. I don't do that anymore. Now I look at them and I'm like, wow. Like sometimes I say that one took longer, but it's not that the painting took longer. It's just that it took me longer to let myself go, right? To get that painting to happen. So this one is actually fairly fresh. I haven't really worked on this one very much. And it's already coming together really quickly and nicely. And I'm already excited to keep working on it. I don't think it'll be finished today, but I do know that when I get back to it, I should be pretty excited to do so, because it has a lot more potential now than it did for me in the beginning. All I'm doing now, if you guys are wondering what I'm doing with my white, I've got my white in my hand, and all I'm trying to do is balance out a bit of the value. So when I'm looking in the camera, I can see like I have a really dark line here. I'm going to want to soften that. I have at the bottom, I don't know if you guys can see the bottom. Let me see if I can adjust this a little better. But at the bottom, I've got a super interesting area here of lights and darks and color and everything else. And I'm sitting back and I'm trying to look at the value, and it's fairly balanced. Aside from a little white over here, which is what I'm trying to do now with my, so even though I may not use white, I'm balancing out my values. So when I'm balancing out the value of light and dark, I just want to see where your eye starts and stops. And it's definitely, this is the greatest area of high and low contrast. And then these little white lines are taking me into this other area where it's dark. And then it moves over because of the line, right? That line should be extended a little bit. I think I've drawn over it. I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to extend that. So now it comes back through here and it drops me down into this area, which feeds down into this area. So by me balancing out the value right early on in the painting, I can continue to refine and say, this white over here is working to bring your eye over here, but maybe it's not interesting enough for me to just have some more white here. So maybe that's where I could take a piece of collage or something that is in a similar tone. See if I can find something quickly that might be of more interest than just putting, so I've underpainted it in white, and now I have a bit of a napkin. So this is where I'm balancing, right? So it's always a balance and between my collage and my paint. I'm going to take this down to its final layer. I'm going to put a little bit of wallpaper paste on it. If I can open up my glue container. Grab a brush. There we go. I'm just going to put a little bit of collage glue, wallpaper paste there. And then I brought something more interesting over to this area. And it could use just a little something more. So what I mean by it could use a little something more is you can see that this is a bit ivory, and so I'm just going to add a little something else. This is completely random. It's just a little scrap of paper, but it's enough contrast to bring my eye up and over. So I'm happy with that. So for now, like, I don't need to work that area to death. For now, that area is color balanced. And let's see if this marker will work. No, it won't. I think my collage should dry a little bit. But you can easily see now that my color balancing is good. I might even use some soft pastels at this point. Playing with a bit of that yellow. Nice. So that one can continue up here. So like I said, I have my darks and my lights, I think, fairly well balanced. My eye is moving very fluidly through my painting, so I'm not going to adjust that much within those realms, but like I said, this line is a bit harsh. I'll soften that. And yeah, anyway, I'll continue to work on this maybe for a little bit. I have no idea what time we're at, but my phone is flashing that I'm low battery, so I'm imagining that it's soon time to call it quits. So if I lose you guys, it's only because I forgot to charge my phone enough, obviously, but that's okay. You get the idea. I won't leave you high and dry on this one. I will not work it too much, but I'm just going to paint a few more details. But I think your takeaway from this should be that when you're looking, I'm going to go back a little bit so that we can see the whole thing. When you're looking at your artwork, just like we did yesterday in Makeover Monday, we're always looking at the composition and the value, right? So when I'm looking at composition, if I were to make a map of this, I would have a big dark area here. I would have a big dark area here. I have a few little areas, and then I have my lines which bring me through, and then I have my next area, which is my darkest midtones, my grays, which are balanced as well. So my eye starts here, moves through here, easily comes up here, intersects at this area, and then brings me back down. So my flow is working through this painting. Every little thing I do now is just sort of sprinkles on the icing on the cake, right? So we keep talking about this in terms of layers. So the foundation's done, the decorating is done. Now we're at like the final little touches, right? This is the stuff that makes things really exciting for us. So I don't want to do anything like big drastic changes at this point because I could offset the balance of what's going on. Let me illustrate that one more way. So if I use paper as an example, this is a sheet of collage paper that's got a lot of like numbers and things like that in a color. So if I were to put this on the bottom and eliminate this white where it's all balanced, do you see what happens? I've just sunk your eyes right off of this area as a starting point, and now we start, I gotta step back, but I think we start somewhere up here. You come down to here, we get a little lost because it's all dark down here, right? So it's like a big sea of grounding, if you will. And then we struggle a little to come back, so our eye just stays up here. This whole bottom part becomes sort of irrelevant and inconsequential to the whole painting. So remember that when you're always working on your composition, once you establish a really good composition first, based on your value and the shapes and the value, like I said, the darks and the lights. And once your eye moves freely through a painting and you can identify that, then the rest is just decorating, right? So now we're just doing like the little touches. And that stuff is fairly fluid. It can come, it can go. It's just a balance of what it is you're doing. So I'm going to say farewell for today because I know now my phone is definitely flashing. So see you all tomorrow, Waxing Wednesday. Not quite sure what I'll do, but maybe I'll come up with a little something. That'll be a fun little project for any of you who do encaustic. Maybe we'll do something together, because it's always fun to collaborate on stuff like that. So thanks everybody, and I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.